to another episode of KSP 101. Today is episode 6, and today we are going to be flying by Minmus and returning. As you can see here, our current contract is for flying by Minmus, gathering scientific data from Minmus, and then returning to Kerbin from a flyby of Minmus. And along the way, we are also going to grab some science data from the space around Kerbin to score a few extra bucks here on this contract as well. Now let's go on ahead and get started by heading to the VAB. We are going to create an entirely new craft just for this flyby, now that we have some updated parts. We are going to start off by breaking out this Mark 1-3 command pod and auto strutting it to heaviest part. And then we will go down to our utility menu and grab this Mark 16 XL parachute and stick it on top. Make sure to set it to grandparent part. Then we will whip out these drogue chutes here and move over one space and set it to radial 2. Grab it, copy it, move it over a couple spaces and set that here. Make sure they are both set to grandparent part. And then we will grab the Mark II-R radial mount parachute, the larger radial parachutes, set those as close to the top as possible, make sure they're set to radial 2. We'll auto strut those to grandparent as well. Then we'll grab the tool to move it in one space, and then we'll move it up one space as well. Looking nice and good there. That's all we're going to need from our utility, so we'll go ahead and move over to the power and grab these photovoltaic panels, the 1x6, set those to radial 2. We'll put those as close to the bottom as possible, set those to grandparent part, grab our battery packs, move those to about here, set those to radial 4, then we'll move those into the pod. Very good. Okay, and then we are going to move on to our science. We will start off by grabbing the mystery goo, and we will set 2 of these up here as high as possible and set that to radial 2. Auto strut those to grandparent part, and then we will move those in just a smidgen like so. Now they should be blocking the parachutes, yet they should still be accessible. And then we'll grab our thermometer and we will set it right here the top of the window and set it to radial 1. We will grab the barometric pressure reader, do the same on the other side. We will grab our 2.5 meter heat shield and put it on the bottom. Make sure that it is also set to, and I believe that should be all that we need for our new command pod. Let's go ahead and set our decoupler under it, set that to grandparent part, and it looks like that should be everything we need, but I doubt we're going to need any RCS thrusters for this mission, so let's also make sure to highlight our pod and get rid of the monopropellant. And we are looking good. That should be everything we need for our command pod. Now let's go ahead and rename this craft. We already have our M1. We're going to name this the M2, and we'll save the craft. Check and make sure. Okay, good. Alright, now let's begin building the rest of this vessel. We will start off by actually taking this off and putting an advanced inline stabilizer on top there. Set it to heaviest part. Grab that and put it back on. Very good. Okay, now let's build this rocket. Now for the vacuum stage, let's go ahead and grab our Rockomax, the middle size that we have available. That sets us at 14 tons. Let's auto strut that to grandparent part and then grab the smaller one. Set it right underneath of it. Now we're at 18.64. Auto strut to grandparent. And this is where we will be placing the Poodle engine. Make sure to set that to root part. And then put our decoupler under there. Set that to grandparent part. go ahead and move the vessel up just a hair so we have a little more room to play with down here. This is where we're going to be building for the Wolfhound stage. We don't want to be any larger than about 35 tons. Let's put the mid-size on again, followed by the small size again. And then let's see what happens when we put this Wolfhound on. See how much we weigh. It'll still be okay, so let's go ahead and do that and set that to root part. And what we will go ahead and do is just copy that stage from the decoupler down and take the Wolfhound off. And then we will put the skipper on at the bottom. Actually, that could be a bit larger, so let's finish setting this to root real quick, and then we'll remove both these fuel tanks. Then we'll grab the largest available Rocco Max fuel tank, which is this one, the X200-32. We'll place it there. And then we will stick a small one underneath of it. And then we will put the skipper back on. Very good, because it is now at 62.210 ton. And the skipper in a vacuum can push 650. We won't quite be in a vacuum by the time we stage, but we'll be in the upper atmosphere, so it should be okay. Go ahead and put a T25 decoupler under that. Set it to grandparent. And now we are going to be using a new engine. It's called the mainsail. It can push at launch about 137 tons. So let's go ahead and try to make this stage a bit larger at the bottom for our launch. Two of these larger Rocco Maxes on. And just for the sake of aesthetics, I'm going to put a mid-sized Rocco Max here and then reattach those. Let's move our vessel up just a hair again. Go back down here, and I'm going to stick another mid-sized one down here. And then we will attach the mainsail at the bottom. Not the skipper, the mainsail. There we go. And then we'll auto strut that to root part. We'll open up our center of mass overlay, thrust overlay, aerodynamic overlay. Zoom out a little bit so we can see what we're looking at. Alright, so let's grab our basic fins, set it to radial 4 close to the bottom, see where that gets us. Right in the middle, very good. Alright, now I'm going to move these over 1, 2, 3 spaces over here, set those to grandparent part, and then we're going to break out our launch stabilizers, set those to the side, as close to the center of mass as possible, which is going to probably be here, I suppose. Let's put 4 of those there. And then we can lower our rocket down. Make sure to go to the radial 1, and then lower the rocket down, raise it just above the ground. Looks pretty solid. Says we cannot transmit science and consumer not receiving monopropellant. That's fine. We don't need the monopropellant, and we're not going to be transmitting any science. So let's go ahead and check our staging, make sure that it's all good. We just need to make sure that this mainsail is going off before those are. Then our second stage will be the skipper. We'll make sure that the decoupler is set under the engine, same for the third stage and same for the fourth stage. Then we just need to go up here and separate these parachutes. What we want going off first are the drogue chutes. We'll put those in the stage right after the decoupler, followed by the other larger radial mount parachutes with the larger parachute that is at the top of the vessel. Let's go ahead and save. Make sure that we have the kerbals that we want to take with us. In this case, we will be taking Valentina as the pilot, Bill, and Bob. That way, hopefully, we can level up Bob in the process. Let's save, and then go to launch. Now, going to Minmus is a bit like going to the moon, except we're going to have to do what's called an degree of inclination burn to change it to the proper degree of inclination that Minmus is in orbit. We will get to that once we get to space. For now, let's take a look at this vessel. Looking very good. Let's turn our SA on, throttle up, and launch. Nice little thrust to weight ratio. Moving up nice and slow first. That way we can maximize fuel efficiency. We got it as close as possible to the launchability of the engine versus the tonnage, the weight. So once we hit 100 meters per second, we will begin our standard orbital entry burn around Kerbin. And we will begin our turning now. Very slowly move it over here to the 90 mark. By then we should be at about 175 meters per second with the prograde right on top of that 90 mark. And we'll move over to the 80 mark, making sure to stay at 90 degrees of inclination along the way. And we want that prograde to be right over top of 90 by about 250 meters per second, and then we will continue to move over between 50 and 40 on that 90 degree inclination, or as I've been saying in the other episodes, the literal 90 mark. I'm gonna make sure to be there by between 500 meters per second and 1000. The closer you can get to 500 meters per second, the better, as long as your thrust to weight is optimized. We'll get there a little behind 500, or a little over, but that's okay. Once we get to the stage, and once we hit this 90 mark, let's go ahead and lock our prograde and make sure that our degree of inclination is at 90 degrees, and we'll let it go on ahead and do its thing until our apoapsis is at 70,000. This could take a little while, so let's just go ahead and let it turn and burn. And while we're waiting for that, since it is going to take a little longer, we'll go ahead and zoom out and set our target for Minmus. And I can also go ahead and show you the ascent and descent nodes. This is the degree of alignment that I was talking about. There's an easy way and a hard way, but there's also a preferred way, which is once you are on your way to Minmus, about halfway there, your ascent or descent node should be over there, about halfway between Kerbin and Minmus, and around then you will either do a normal or anti-normal burn to correct that degree of inclination, and then you'll finish off the rest of the burn to make the encounter happen. But if we can get it to where the ascent node is a little sooner before our circularization or before our burn to Minmus, we'll take it and we'll go ahead and correct it earlier. Now we are about to hit 70,000 meters, so let's go ahead and start moving to full sideways. And then we will lock our SAS on the horizon. And that couldn't have happened at a better time. Let's go ahead and stage and make sure that we are at a 90 degree inclination and set the SAS there on the horizon line. And we'll let that go ahead and do its thing until it hits 100,000 meters. Keep an eye on the vessel. Once we hit close to 70,000, we'll go ahead and deploy these new solar panels that we have. Go ahead and rotate ourselves nice and lined up with the horizon. Let's make sure we move that back down to that line. Check our apoapsis. Should be pretty close to leaving the atmosphere. Let's go ahead and highlight both of these by holding the R1 button and hitting square on the PlayStation, holding the right shoulder button and hitting, I believe, X on the Xbox. Now that we are out of the atmosphere, let's extend our solar panels real quick. Deselect those and go back to the map view, and keep an eye on our apoapsis here. Go ahead and also open our resources menu so we can keep track of our fuel. We are starting to gain altitude on that apoapsis a little quicker now, so we'll wait for that to do its thing. We are swiftly approaching this ascent node too, so let's actually go ahead and cut our burn and try to set to anti-normal as quickly as possible so we can just go ahead and correct our degree of inclination with the ascent node, Anti-normal is the one that is pointing down. Go ahead and begin burning as close as possible to it. And then once that hits as close to 0 as possible, we are going to quit our burn and prepare to make our orbital burn around Kerbin. It's getting closer, about halfway. It will not go any lower, I'd say, so we'll just stop there and then point prograde. Once we are back to full prograde, let's make sure our rotation is correct again. And then go back to map view, check out our apoapsis. We're about halfway circularized, a little under halfway, maybe like, I don't know, maybe 2/5 of the way circularized. So we'll wait until about 30 seconds away from the apoapsis and then we'll begin to burn again. Let's actually just go ahead and time warp. Okay, and then we will slowly pick up our speed to where the apoapsis is no longer moving either forward or backward, ahead of us or behind us, towards us. Once it starts to push forward, we'll back off a little bit and wait until it's at about 10 seconds. Zoom out a little bit so we can keep an eye out for that periapsis to pop out. And once it hits about 10 seconds away, let's go ahead and resume our burn right now at full throttle. We will wait for that periapsis to pop out, cut the engines, highlight it, and slowly move it up towards, I guess in this case, 83,986 meters. The closer we get to the apoapsis, the more we're going to increase the speed until we can circularize like so. Now that we are fully circularized, we have Minmus coming across our horizon before we can reach the descent or descent node to finish our correction burn. But if we want to be a perfectionist, we can go ahead and skip our first chance to make an encounter and go straight to the descent node. However, actually before we hit that, let's go ahead and cancel our warp. We want to be aiming at normal for the descending node and advance. That way as soon as we arrive we can start burning. So let's go ahead and do that. Make sure we're right on top of that normal node. And then go ahead and warp over here to the descending node. Zoom in nice and close so we can be as close as possible, as accurate as possible. Begin to burn. And cut off. There we go. Now that should be a very nice tight angle of inclination. So let's go ahead and warp back around to about here, where Minmus is going to be on that side of the planet over the horizon. Let's make our way around. Let's see us there in about maybe 16 more seconds from now. And we need to also make sure that we are locked on the prograde in advance. That way the vessel corrects its orientation. And once we are there, we can see the target marker coming up. Let's get our vessel sideways so our solar panels are on top and below us. That way it's not being blocked out by the vessel itself, getting maximum energy flow. Let's go ahead and time warp ahead until our prograde marker is starting to touch that target marker. Let's go back to the map and begin our burn. Zoom back out. Let's check out our fuel too. Okay, we're gonna have to stage well before we ever even cross the Mun's path, let alone Minmus. Looks like the Mun might get in our way, but we'll find out. Let's prepare to stage in 3, 2, 1, stage. Now, we have plenty of Delta V to make our way to Minmus, and while we're flying by, like on the episode we did with the Mun flyby, we'll make a quick orbit, and then break the orbit and return back to Kerbin. It's going to be a little bit longer of a burn, but once it reaches around 7 million meters, which should be at about here, it will increase rapidly, so we'll have to make sure to keep an eye on that. And we also want to make sure that we're not going to go to the Mun, we're trying to go to Minmus. So let's finish our burn. Looks like the Mun is actually going to mess with our transfer a little bit. If the Mun wasn't in the way, it would have been a more perfect transfer, so let's move our focus to the Mun. Okay, so our descent node is located about halfway through our pass by the Mun, so let's go ahead and time warp over here. Once we enter the Mun sphere of influence, we'll just have to keep an eye on it and try to cross the path of the descending node around the same time that, see, this is hard to explain. Let's highlight our Mun escape. Now, as you can see here, the Mun escape is there in our vessel. If you were to move this Mun escape and its line down to here, our descending node would almost be right on top of our periapsis. So we need to go ahead and point back towards normal again and lock ourselves there, and then go ahead and time warp forward until our vessel is right on top of that descending node. We'll have to do another correction burn since we decided to cross the path of the Mun, since the Mun decided to get in our way. Once we are there, make sure to focus back on the vessel, zoom in nice and tight so you can see it better. We'll slow down there. Try to go on a top-down view. We'll time warp the rest of the way. Thanks to the Mun sphere of influence, it's altering our trajectory, which is why we have to do this. Let's go ahead and slow down and start to burn. Okay, so that's not going the way it should be. Let's turn ourselves around back to anti-normal now. And lock ourselves onto anti-normal and start burning. Let's try to highlight that so we can keep an eye on it. Once that gets as close to 0 as possible, we will back off. Looks like we overshot it, so let's go back to normal and just barely thrust a little bit until, okay, that's fairly close. Alright, so now let's point back prograde, highlight our apoapsis, and continue the rest of the burn until we get the encounter. We're swiftly approaching that encounter now. And go ahead and cut the engines off after you have the encounter, and then focus your view on Minmus. Looks like our periapsis is already pretty close, but where it's very easy to mess up and overshoot by thrusting with Minmus, we need to reduce our thrust limiter. Let's go ahead and move it down to about 15 or so, and then we will very slowly throttle up, and then we need to try to correct our orientation here, but we will do that. Just focus back on our vessel. We will do that once we escape the Mun. We will be needing to point anti-normal since we are approaching the ascending node. Let's lock there and then go ahead and warp the rest of the way out of the Mun sphere of influence. Zoom in nice and tight so we can get a good view of this and how we're going to be affecting it. Now, keeping in mind that our thrust limiter is set down to 15, but it should still be okay. Finish time warping the rest of the way to this ascend node. Oh, looks like it disappeared, so let's go ahead and cut that off. That's okay, we'll just refocus on Minmus, zoom in, and we'll see, we'll realign ourselves with the anti-normal so we can pull this down. Once we are at anti-normal, let's lock it, and then we'll see how that affects it as we do it. I want to keep an eye on our periapsis because once it doesn't go down any further and starts to go back up, around there, that's when we're going to cut it off. Then we'll try to increase our periapse again by retro burning just a little bit. We want it to be a little closer than that though. We want it to be at about 15,000 meters. We need to actually lower our thrust limiter even more because it's very sensitive around Minmus, where there's virtually no gravity. There's just barely any gravity at all. So let's go back to our map view, highlight our periapses, and increase it, or decrease it down to about 14,000 or so. Let's save there. And then we'll set our time warp ahead one space and see how much that affects it. Just added 4 meters, that's good, we'll take it. And while it's set to time warp just one mark ahead, let's warp to where we just enter the Minmus system, or sphere of influence, sorry. Let's go back to our map view. Once we're there, we need to make sure that we're pointing retrograde in advance, and we'll begin to do our science. And we need to make sure on the way back to get the science around Kerbin, even though we're not going to be able to use it for science. We can use it to complete that contract and score a few $1,000 there. Alright, so we are now in the sphere of influence and Minmus, looking nice, pretty, and mint back there. Let's go ahead and start doing some science. Let's grab a crew report. Then we'll grab our barometric reading. And we will open up one of these mystery goos and grab that as well. We'll go to the other side and get this thermometer reading. There it is. Alright, and then we will hop out of the vessel. We'll use our scientist, Bob, here to demonstrate what scientists are useful for. Scientists can also interact with these outside of the vessel, but for now I'm going to be showing you, after we collect the mystery goo data, we can restore the usability of the mystery goo. Okay, from there, let's go ahead and take our barometric reading and our temperature log. Then we will grab our crew report out of the command pod, opening it up for the ability to get another crew report once we get close to Minmus. And while we're out, let's go ahead and collect our EVA report. And since this is my first time using Bob, well, I actually have to close the warp menu before I can do that, so let's hop back out with Bob. EVA. And then let's turn his lights on by holding L1 and then hitting square, or the left shoulder button and X on the Xbox. And for my scientists, I like them to be a bit of a mixture of green maxed out with blue maxed out to have a nice teal color. Now in review, my pilots are full red, my engineers are full red and full green to make yellow, and then my scientists are full green and full blue to make teal. I'm not sure if you've ever watched Star Trek, but there's a reference. Let's get back into the vessel and prepare to make our orbital burn. We'll set the time warp forward 1, and then let's go ahead and warp ahead to where we're just behind that periapse. Let's focus back on our vessel. Zoom in a little bit on our way. Make sure that we are ready to hit retro. We are now 40 seconds away. Let's go ahead and cut that in half. It's not going to take too much to do this, but you are going to have to slow down quite a bit to be able to make orbit around Minmus, where it's got a very massive lack of gravity and it's not really moving around Kerbin too quickly, where it's not too close. Once it hits 10 seconds, we'll start our retro burn. We need to make sure to set our thruster back to full on that limiter. There we go. We are very quickly burning into an orbit. Once we make orbit, we'll back off and try to get this science done before we hit that 20,000 mark again on our way around the orbit. See, as you can see, I think if you're below 20,000 meters, you are considered in the space around Minmus, near Minmus, sorry. Let's go ahead and try to get this science quickly, because it could be 15,000 meters. I could be wrong. I'm not 100% certain. So we'll hurry up and grab this before it hits 15,000, and then we can actually find out. Let's get our crew reports, and then we will EVA very quickly and get an EVA report with our scientist here. Very good. And our EVA report will be above Minmus's greater flats. So let's grab that, and now we have hit 15,000. Let's go ahead and take the data, the crew report included, and then store everything back in there and check the EVA report again. Okay, so we are still in the space near Minmus, if I'm not mistaken. Let's go ahead and get in the vessel just to make sure. We can make sure by highlighting the command pod and going for a crew report again. We're not going to take it, but we're just going to check. Okay, so we're still in the space near Minmus, so as long as you are under 20,000 meters, you are considered in the space near Minmus. So let's get our scientist back out again so we can grab all the science from the space near Minmus. Let's collect the data from this goo canister, and then we will restore it. Go to this side, collect the data, and restore it. Then we will grab our thermometer and barometric pressure reader data. And we will enter the vessel, dump anything that we might have already had, and time warp ahead just a little bit to where we're over top of this biome. Then we'll close our time warp and EVA again with Bob. And we will check our EVA report again, and it should be over top of a new biome, the lowlands. So we'll grab that, hop back in. And then we'll fast forward again just a smidgen until we're above where it looks like it's another biome, where it's up a little higher. Let's EVA with Bob. Oh, wrong one. There we go. And then we will very quickly try to check our EVA report again to see if we are... Nope, we are still above the lowlands. So let's dump that. Time warp ahead just a smidgen. And let's try to do this one more time. Let's see if we can squeeze one more out of this. If we wanted to, we could really take our time and just rotate around. Let's see, I don't think we're going to get another biome, so that's okay. If we really wanted to, we could just zip around Minmus over and over in this orbit and collect various biome EVAs from the space near Minmus, but we're not going to do that. You can if you want, but for now, let's go ahead and point back prograde. Now, if we go ahead and increase it from where it is now, let's see where that takes us. Alright, we are going back towards Kerbin since we are on the opposite end. Let's go ahead and move that in as close as possible. I want it down to about between 45 to 35,000 meters. Looks like we overshot it just a hair. So let's point retrograde and barely thrust a little bit until we see our periapsis poke its head back out. Alright, now let's highlight it, and then we'll increase it to about 37,000. That'll work. Let's save. Let's zoom in so I can show y'all something. Now technically, this trajectory is in line to have begun around this side of Minmus, where Minmus would be here, and we would have been right in line between Minmus and Kerbin, much like how we left the Mun. That's the optimal time to make our transfer burn back to Kerbin. But for now, let's highlight that periapsis and time warp ahead just once. It did not affect it at all, so we'll take it. Let's go ahead and warp nice and close to Kerbin, but not too close, so we're not just time warping straight into the atmosphere. We do not want to do that. We just want to be nice and close. Now we're slowly moving out past Minmus right now, and here very soon our altitude start to decrease, and now we are heading very quickly back to Kerbin, which is... where'd you go, Kerbin? Where'd you go, Kerbin? You guys see it? I don't see it. There it is. Alright, let's go ahead and highlight our photovoltaic panels. Have those ready to retract once we get nice and close to Kerbin. Make sure that you're pointing retrograde. Make sure that you're also set to surface. And we'll go ahead and time warp the rest of the way forward until we're at about 85,000 meters above the surface of Kerbin. Once we're there, once we're close to there, we'll slow that time warp down just a hair so we can make it as accurate as possible. Be there in about 7.5 seconds now, maybe less. Slow that time warp down just a little bit and prepare to cancel it by hitting square or X on the Xbox. Alright, and then we will begin our retro burn while we close these solar panels back up. And then deselect that. Close our time warp menu so we can adjust our rotation. Let's get a nice view of Kerbin on the way this time, so let's set it to where our back is towards space. If you hit L1 and then the right stick in, you can see inside the vessel. A little bit of a view there. Let's go ahead and exit back out by hitting that again. Once again, we over-engineer a little bit, so we have a lot of extra fuel to use up, but I don't think we necessarily have to. We have quite a few parachutes, so let's stop our engines. And instead of decoupling next, we're going to take this decoupler and set it up above the parachutes. And let's just go through our burn here. We can just increase the throttle just a little bit so we don't lose control of the vessel while we're making entry. Set it to about 1/3 thrust. I want to conserve a little bit of this fuel because we might need it if we're going to try to land the entire vessel. It's a little risky if you don't want to do it. You don't have to do it. You can just keep your decoupler where it was, and about here you should be running out of fuel if you were still burning at full throttle, and you'd be decoupling. And we are really starting to feel the G-force increase a little bit. Once it hits above the first mark, it's going to rapidly increase. So let's decrease this a little bit. The engine should be fine, it should not overheat, but we'll really know once the G-forces start to pack on. Hopefully it doesn't explode, but we'll find out. But once that starts to decrease, as well as our G-forces decreasing, because we'll be done with our entry burn, we'll cut the engines off to save fuel. Oh, we're losing control of the vessel. Let's just activate our engines at full throttle until it pulls us back around to retrograde, if it will let us. If not, let's cut the engines off so we're not increasing our speed. Make sure to keep it locked on retrograde though, that way it can still try to slow us down as much as possible. Try to lose this speed so we can activate these drove chutes and not lose the vessel. See, we are coming out of our entry burn at a very low altitude. That is not good. We need to lose this speed. As soon as it's safe to deploy those drogues, deploy them as quickly as possible. In fact, go ahead and stage so they deploy as quickly as possible without us having to worry about staging. Should be any moment now, and hopefully we can save the vessel. Just deploy everything and cut taps. We're gonna try to land it, but oh, we just lost the vessel. This is why we quick save. Let's go to our quick save. Pick back up where we left off. Ah, I know why I did that to us. It's because we forgot to grab the science from the space around Kerbin on the way back like we were supposed to. Alright, so let's go ahead and pick up where we were. Time warp ahead a little bit. It did not affect our periapsis. Let's time warp. Go ahead and cancel that so we can do this a little faster. Check our periapsis, it's still good. Okay, now let's do it. Oh, okay, it's not going any faster. So let's just wait until we get back close to Kerbin, and we'll make sure to grab some space, or some science from the space around Kerbin this time. And we'll make sure to eject that stage this time, because obviously that's not going to go the way we want it to, is it? Okay. we need to make sure that the thrust limiter is set to max. Let's go on ahead and activate or highlight these so we can be prepared to close them upon arrival. Make sure that we're set to retro and set to surface. Look at the moon wrapping around the planet. It looks like it's wanting to smash into us so bad, but it's not going to, is it? Alright, let's finish our warp close to the planet. Once we're nice and close, let's cut that and slowly bring ourselves in. Once we're at 100,000, we'll back off this time. And then we'll retract those solar panels and grab the science very quickly before we lose the chance to do it. Okay, let's just grab a crew report for the science. Nice, quick and easy. Let's reorient our vessel's rotation and begin the retro burn because we are coming in very hot. I want to try to reduce that as quickly as possible, as much as possible. Let's check out our line as well. Slowly decreasing it, but we'll be okay. But once we start to feel that burn, or if you know when you're going to start feeling it, go ahead and decouple that stage in advance if you know when you're going to start feeling it, but I'm going to wait until we start feeling the burn. I'm going to cut that engine and I'm going to decouple and kind of move the vessel over a little bit so we can minimize the risk of smashing into that if it happens to come back at us as it slows down. And we'll just go ahead and time warp the rest of the way. Once we really start to feel those G-forces, we will want to back off the time warp so it doesn't flip our vessel around. Once it passes the green zone, we'll slow it down to ×3. And if you see the vessel's orientation mark on the nav ball start to move away from the retro, that's when you really need to back off on the time warp and just cancel it entirely just in case. Okay, so we are done with our entry burn. Let's time warp down until we can activate those drogue chutes. Go ahead and time warp ahead until those fully deploy. Those were fully deployed about 2,500 meters. Around them, we're going to cancel our time warp and activate our other parachutes. And let's go ahead and finish our landing. And as always, I like to stress that you want to cancel this right before you hit the water or the ground, because time warp does affect the vessels. It can destroy your vessel if you're not careful, depending on how much the vessel weighs. For most vessels, whenever you're just returning with a pod that doesn't weigh a whole lot and is coming in at a relatively decent speed, there's not much risk, but there's always the chance. So once we hit about 50 meters, 30 to 50 meters, I'm going to cancel and let it finish itself off. And we have returned from a flyby and orbit of Minmus. Let's check our accomplishments here. Return trip from Minmus, close encounter, explore Minmus. That means we have completed that contract. Well, we will have completed the contract as soon as we recover the vessel because we have all that science in the pod, which you can highlight and review if you want. This is all the science we have gained on this mission. And we will also have completed this contract as well once we recover the vessel. Then we just need to, if I'm not mistaken, the next contract should be for rendezvousing, docking, and transferring between vessels in orbit around Minmus. So let's go ahead and close that now and then recover our vessel. We may not do the rendezvous, dock, and transfer between vessel contract until the next episode. But for now, let's go ahead and check out all the science we gained. We landed pretty far from the Kerbal Space Center, so we're not getting a whole lot back, but that's irrelevant. Looks like everybody advanced one level, which is really good, especially for Valentina, because that will unlock more marks on our nav ball that we can use. If I'm not mistaken, we should now have normal, anti-normal, radio in, and radio out unlocked. but we will find out whenever we use Valentina again next time. And we have completed the Minmus contract, and we have also completed the Space Around Kerbin contract, scoring a little money from that. And we have gathered the first scientific data from Minmus, which fulfills the last part of that contract. We have completed both of those, leaving the new orbital station around Minmus. Now, the reason why I took that contract when I did is because we're going to be launching this vessel, except now we're going to have the new larger docking port unlocked here shortly. And we're going to replace the top parachute with that. And once we do our rendezvous docking and transfer contract, those new command pods can support up to 3 Kerbals. When you put 2 of those together docked up, that's 6 Kerbals, which means we'll have a facility supporting at least 5. And one ship is going to have a pilot, the other ship is going to have a pilot, meeting the parameters for having 2 pilots on the station. And all that's left is the antenna, docking port, and generating power. Both vessels will be able to generate and store power. They'll both have docking ports. We just need to make sure to add an antenna to at least one of them. And once we maintain a stable orbit around Minmus with those 2 vessels docked, that will fulfill this last parameter, which is maintain stability for 10 seconds, and we will have put a station in orbit around Minmus, technically. And the reason why I didn't want to pass that up, if you look, that will be giving us, we've got $107,500 in advance, and upon completion we're going to get $278,828 more on top of that. So that's going to be a nice chunk of change. So now let's check our contracts. Okay, it's asking us to go ahead and land on Minmus and then return from the surface of Minmus. That's actually very easy to complete. We're not going to do that yet. Much like last time, it skipped the rendezvous docking and transferring between vessels around Minmus. That contract would not be likely to pop up this time until we complete this contract, but we have plenty of money. We're almost at $2 million now, so we're going to skip the rendezvous docking and transferring between vessel contract and go ahead and do it anyways. And once we're there, we'll take one of those vessels after they dock, we'll undock them and go ahead and land on Minmus, because it is so much easier to land on Minmus than it is on the Mun. It requires a lot less delta V, and we'll be able to pull it off very easily. And since we're only taking 1 pilot per vessel, we can go ahead and sneak in a scientist and an engineer into each of the vessels as well. Like 1 scientist in 1 vessel, the engineer in the other vessel. And we'll send a pilot with that engineer and the scientist down to the surface to deploy the breaking ground science, and then reorbit and make our way back to Kerbin and land both of those vessels together. But we'll do that in the next episode. For now, let's go ahead and take the contract for Minmus and any other contracts that have to do with Minmus, which is bringing a green sandstone back with you. Let's go ahead and take that. There's a good chance we might not come across a green sandstone, or we might, but we'll find out. Now we need to take the science data from the Space Around Minmus contract. We can make sure to grab that and bring it home as well. We'll take the Plant a Flag on Minmus contract and the science data from the surface of Minmus contract. And let's see. Mystery Goo observations. See, this I believe is for the breaking ground Mystery Goo. 50% of the surface deployed Mystery Goo observation science on Minmus. Let's go ahead and take that as well, because that's a nice chunk of change, and we're going to be deploying that as well. It doesn't hurt to take it. If we happen to not be able to bring a green sandstone back with us, it's only a little bit more costly on the failure than the advance that we got, so it's not really going to hurt. This, however, it's barely much more on the failure than it was in the cost of the advance payment that we got as well. So if we don't happen to complete this one due to some failure in the game like we almost had with the Mun's breaking ground science modules, it won't really be costly if we don't complete that, and the same for the green sandstone. But we should be able to complete every bit of this, as well as the rendezvous, docking, and transferring between vessels in the next episode. For now, let's go ahead and spend some of the science that we just got. We are at 412, which means we can get 2 of these 160 range techs if we want, or we can finish off some of these 90 range techs if we want. But let's see what our options are before we make any decisions. Let's see, we kind of want that science lab so we can prepare to launch a sky lab and pull out a buttload of science from that. But we also do want these larger reaction wheels, especially on Minmus. We're gonna want to be able to turn the vessel pretty quickly, and unless you're using RCS, it's going to be a little difficult with larger vessels like we've been using. We may even want these larger landing legs. Let's see what else we have though. We do need the larger docking port, which is right here, and we can't get that unless we get this. And overall that would cost us 90 plus 160, which is 250, which would leave us about 162. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's get this, which by the way also provides us with some fairings, which would be very nice to have, especially a 1.875 meter fairing, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, we got the nose cones for the larger tanks as well as some new decouplers, which are very good. These Rockomax brand adapters are also good for mounting smaller engines on larger tanks. It's just really good to have these fairings as well. More advanced nose cones. These structural tubes will be useful whenever we start to build things like stations. That's a great amount of stuff that we actually needed there. Let's go ahead and make sure that we unlock this larger docking port, which doesn't really give us a whole lot more. It gives us a 2.5 meter protective shell for the fairing. It's pretty useful. And these nose cones point inward towards the vessel, a little more aerodynamic, which is also useful. This girder can be useful at times. Other than that, there's not much more that we unlocked from that we needed, but we can still unlock one more of these advanced 160 range techs. And I think for now, out of all of these, we are going to just go ahead and take this so we can get some larger monopropellant tanks and, more importantly, this advanced reaction wheel. We really want that. Alright, so we are looking good. We have no more science that we can spend, but there's not really much else that we kind of want right now besides these landing legs here. But I think we'll be okay, especially because we're landing on Minmus. It's not going to take a whole lot to do that. We're not really going to need those landing legs. I think we'll be okay as long as we have some RCS to stabilize ourselves once we land. Now, the real question is, with all this money that we have, we're at 2.3 million now because of all those contracts that we took and the advanced payments that we got from those. Do we want to upgrade any of these facilities? Now here soon, with the tech tree, we cannot research anything over 300, and we're going to be getting science rapidly, but that's also going to cost us 1.6 million, so we're not quite ready to upgrade that. Other things that we need to upgrade: we can increase our deep space network range to, I believe, 100G instead of 50 if we want to. Right now it wouldn't cost a whole lot out of what we have, but I think we're okay with that for now as well, so we won't do that. The max parts that we can use is a 255. I don't foresee us using more than 255 anytime soon, so we won't worry about that either, and that was pretty costly. How about our launch pad? It's fully upgraded now, so we don't have to worry about that. Mission Control Center, I don't think we really need to upgrade that, but it's very cheap, and we do want to max out all of our upgrades, so let's go ahead and do that. And then we will check our astronaut complex. It's also very cheap. If we do that, all it would really allow is for an unlimited amount of active Kerbals that are out on missions. But like I said, we're trying to max all these out, and it's pretty cheap, so let's go ahead and do it. So other than that, I don't believe there's anything else that we are going to be upgrading. The administration building's cheap, but we're never going to worry about that until we have no more science left to do, and I'll show you why. In the administration building, there's this one right here, I believe. Well, let's see. Here it is. This one you can convert any science that you might have into funds. Like this. If it was fully upgraded, we could do it. We could max our commitment out and get 105 bucks from our measly 2 science that we have. Doesn't seem like much, but once you're like into tens of thousands of science and you have nothing to spend it on, and you're starting to run out of money because there are no more contracts to do, or you have contracts that you prefer not to do or that are very difficult to do, you can convert that science into cash and keep going. So it's very useful to have that research rights sellout, and very useful to also have that fully upgraded so you can maximize the amount of science that you are selling out and getting funds from. But it looks like that's all we can do for now, so just to recap, in the next episode we are going to send 2 of the vessels that we just launched into orbit around Minmus so they can rendezvous, dock up as soon as we refit the vessel, and complete the rendezvous, dock up, transfer, as well as creating a station around Minmus. And then we're going to be gathering some science from around Minmus, landing on the surface, searching for green sandstone, doing some science on the surface, as well as deploying some breaking ground science modules, planting a flag, and then returning from the surface. That's quite a few contracts we have here, about 7, on top of 3 to 4 other achievements that will also pay out and give us a tad bit of science as well. So we have quite the mission ahead of us. I'm looking forward to that episode, and once we're done with that episode, I believe we are going to be leaving the Kerbin system and heading to our first extraplanetary body, which should be Duna on the contracts. But until the next episode, thank you for watching. Hope you had a good time with me. Hope you're learning something, and I hope this has helped someone. And I'll see you all in the next episode. Thanks for watching. Peace out.